Former President Donald Trump has repeatedly made the claim that the United States trade deficit with Canada is a $200 billion subsidy to our northern neighbor. This figure, he argues, represents a loss for the U.S. economy and a free ride for Canada. Trump has even suggested annexing Canada as a solution to this perceived imbalance. Trump's rhetoric on trade often relies on a zero-sum view, where one country's gain is inherently another's loss. This perspective ignores the complexities of international trade and the benefits that come from specialization and comparative advantage. Trump's claims have resonated with some who are concerned about the decline of American manufacturing and the loss of jobs to foreign countries. However, a closer examination of the facts reveals a very different picture. Economists and trade experts have widely disputed Trump's characterization of the trade deficit as a subsidy. They argue that trade deficits are not inherently bad, and can actually be a sign of economic strength. Moshe Lander, an economist at Concordia University, points out that Trump's view of trade as a zero-sum game is fundamentally flawed. Trade is not about winners and losers, Lander says. It's about both sides benefiting from the exchange of goods and services. Joseph Steinberg of the University of Toronto explains that trade deficits often mean more capital is flowing into the deficit country. This is because the deficit country is buying more goods and services than it is selling, which leads to an inflow of foreign currency. This inflow of capital can then be invested in the deficit country's economy, leading to job creation and economic growth. The actual trade figures between the US and Canada tell a very different story than the one painted by Trump. In 2024, total trade between the two countries exceeded $760 billion. While the US did have a trade deficit with Canada, it was only $63 billion, significantly lower than Trump's claimed $200 billion. Furthermore, this deficit has been steadily shrinking in recent years. It is also important to note that the US enjoys a trade surplus with Canada in services. When services are factored in, the overall trade balance between the two countries is much closer to even. The US benefits greatly from its trade relationship with Canada. Canada is the largest export market for the United States, with US exports to Canada totaling $349.4 billion in 2024. This trade supports millions of jobs in both countries. One of the most important aspects of the US-Canada trade relationship is energy. Canada is a major supplier of oil, natural gas, and electricity to the United States. In fact, energy products make up roughly one-third of all Canadian exports to the US. This energy trade is vital to the US economy, providing affordable and reliable energy to American businesses and consumers. The US also benefits from cheaper Canadian imports, such as aluminum. Canada's abundant and inexpensive hydroelectricity, particularly in Quebec, allows it to produce aluminum at a lower cost than the United States. This benefits both countries. Canada gets to utilize its natural resources and generate jobs, and the US gets access to cheaper raw materials for its manufacturing sector. In conclusion, Trump's claims about the US-Canada trade deficit being a $200 billion subsidy are simply not supported by the facts. The actual deficit is much smaller, and the overall trade relationship between the two countries is mutually beneficial.